Good morning, students. Today we come to the last part of film moments. So far we have discussed Soviet and montage. Later we discussed French poetic realism, classical Hollywood cinema, Italian neorealism, and now we come to French New Wave. So according to your syllabus, this is the last film moment you have to study. There are a lot of film moments which happened all around the world, but you have to study till French New Wave. So we'll start with French New Wave. We'll begin with the origin of French New Wave. This French New Wave came about in the late 1950s. As we shall see that it did have precursors. The term refers to all those films made by a new generation of French filmmakers which were low budget. And most importantly, it went against all those prevailing trends in the 1950s where cinemas were made out of literary adaptation, were more of a literary adaptations, contained all those costume dramas, and they were massive co-productions. So these are a set of films which went against these conventional modes of filmmaking. The term associated with French New Wave is Nouvelle Vague. It is actually a French term coined by an editor, François Giroud, which actually meant or actually referred to all those newly socially active youth. Later, it got meaning as a new trend in French cinema. It got associated with this French New Wave. And as I said earlier, we see this rebellion against this standardized French cinema of literary adaptations, and they desired to seek a new visual language, a language of camera, not of pen, a film of camera, not of pen. They believed that a film should come out of camera or not from pen. They believe that it is something like twice removed from reality. And this meant that producers in the late 1950s wanted works made by young ones, both on screen and behind the camera. This demand actually helped to propel a new wave of filmmakers onto the screen. And you should understand that this was not the only reason. This was not the exclusive reason for the emergence of this new cinema. If you consider the demography of France during this time, the older guard of filmmakers who held the reins from the 1930s through to the 1950s were aging fast or dying off. So this actually created a gap for new wave filmmakers for around 170 new directors in the period of 1959 to 63, who in turn became associated in people's mind with this Nouvelle Vague. And along with that, there was this active film journal which made a great impact, which was co-founded by André Basson, which was titled Cahiers De Cinema. It is very important. So, Cahiers De Cinema was an active film journal founded by Andrew Basson, in which all these young film lovers and critics started seriously discussing about films and theories related to films. So it had a major role in the emergence. Cahiers de Cinema had a major role in the emergence of this French New Wave. Along with that, we see the birth of auteur concepts. I hope you are familiar with auteur concepts. It is just the idea that the director is the creator. As it is said that director is the Hitler of cinema. So these group of people, filmmakers, believed in this idea. And there was clear influences from various other movements. First, influence from Italian neorealism in terms of its penchant, affiliation for its social realistic take, and at the same time, it was also influenced by its own predecessor, that is, as you have learned, it is French poetic realism. And in late 40s, Paris used to have a lots of Hollywood imports, particularly all those film novas with all those dark themes with priority given to mise en scene. So all these film imports from Hollywood also influenced this movement. And the other genre from Hollywood, that is gangster cinemas of Hollywood, was keenly studied. And when it was made into French New Wave, what we see is that it underwent a revisionist reworking. For example, Breathless of Godard may be seen as a gangster cinema but completely reworked. So these are the inspirations behind French New Wave. And these are the filmmakers, and all these filmmakers were active in that journal too, Cahiers de Cinema. We have Claude Chabrol, Truffaut. Claude Chabrol is remembered for these films like Ansem Search, Truffaut for 400 Blows, Jewel and Jim, Shoot the Piano Player, Breathless by Godard, Little Soldier, A Woman is a Woman are other his other films. And these are the other big names. The Lone Woman in French New Wave, Agnes Varda, who is remembered for Cleo from 5 to 7, Chris Marker, and Jack Rivet. So these are the other big names. So all of these filmmakers had a similar trait, that is, they had not been through the normal circuit of assistantship to established directors. That is actually a trend we still see today. That is, when you have this desire to become a film director, you first of all approach a renowned director and you work as his assistant. So here we see a group of directors who came to film industry and started working independently without tagging themselves to all those renowned directors. So these are the names: Chabrol, Truffaut, Godard, Agnes Varda, Chris Marker, and Jack Rivet. Now we move to the characteristics. So, as we already know, the new wave filmmakers rejected the cinema of the 1950s and they focused their attention on the auteur and mise en scene. So the individual filmmaker and his signature, that is his film, was all. Their cinema marked a complete rupture with the 1950s cinematic codes and conventions on both the narrative and visual level. We see the complete breakaway from the conventional modes of filmmaking, which were there till 1950s. And in terms of narrative, we see loose narratives. That is, it is said that there is no recit, RECIT. There is no completed or necessarily realistic story as such. There was no beginning, middle, and end. So it is completely against all those classic narration. More often, it is something like a slice of life, completely breaking away from those literary adaptations of the 1950s and completely breaking away from what is known as high art literature and concentrating upon pulp or popular fiction. And here we see there are no stars. And these actors were allowed to do improvisation because all these scripts were less structured scripts. They were not something like very systematic, organized scripts there. It was less structured, which gave freedom for the actors to improve. And talking about the edits, they usually preferred discontinuous editing. They used jump cuts, and as I said earlier, they completely ignored all those chronological sense of classical narrative. Along with that, we see some kind of distanciation, something like the actors looking at camera and conversing to audience. So that actually was given, or that actually was tried to deny that spectator identification. As you see, as you have studied in poems like of Brecht, like the effect of alienation effect, where this spectator is not allowed to have a relaxed view. It is usually associated with the theater movement of people like Brecht, where they completely deny that spectator identification. So that mode is known as distanciation. So they used that technique in these films too. So on the visual side, we see a complete deconstruction of the conventional iconography, the establishing shots, which actually safely orient the spectator in terms of space and time, were completely removed. So they completely removed all those establishing shots, which make the spectators comfortable. They completely removed that. So they used a fast editing style achieved by jump cuts and unmatched shots. All these things replaced that seamless editing style that prevailed before. And the newly adopted lightweight camera, more commonly used for television, were used for this new wave cinema. Along with that, one important fact is that new wave cinema completely abandoned the studios and went out into the streets and suburbs of Paris. So, locations are all those city spaces of Paris. Paris was the icon that, that did not disappear. And film stock was fast and cheap. And these aspects of technology gave this cinema a sense of spontaneity, which was mostly live. And the modes of production and these counter cinema practices became commonplace, like location shooting, use of all those non professional actors, a deliberate distanciation so that spectator identification cannot occur. There is no necessary sense of chronology or classic narrative. So, these are the recognizable traits of New Wave films. We see subversion of genres, use of counterpoints, or juxtaposition, bringing together of two stories. One may be based in the personal and the other in the social, and a completely disorienting editing style. So, these are the important features of French New Wave. And talking about the themes, they dealt with all those existentialist themes, talking about the loneliness of individuals. And most of these films had association with Paris. As I said earlier, Paris also becomes a character. And here we see women characters with more power. They have more agency on screen. They are independent characters, providing or displaying an independent mindset. And these films attacked all those bourgeoisie myths, especially those surrounding marriage, family, and consumption practices. So, all these stereotypes related to these institutions were taken to bits and denormalized. It talked about the consumer boom, nuclear war, Vietnam, student politics, about adolescence. So, these were the subjects for treatment in these new wave films. And generally, it showed leftist perspective. And the impacts it made. It has inspired a new generation of young filmmakers across the globe. Although this cinema was criticized for its focus on the individual, its emphasis on author, and also criticized for its confessional style, it actually left one of the very important legacies. Thanks to all those huge influx of filmmakers into the industry around 170, as I said earlier, all these production practices had to be reconsidered. And for money to be spread around, these films had to be low budget. And given the number of filmmakers, the cheaper, lightweight camera came into its own. As a result, it's important there was something known as democratization of camera. We see more a kind of a democracy in filmmaking. And it actually countered all those Hollywood dominations by inspiring to make all those national cinemas. We have British New Wave, followed by Indian parallel cinema by Ray, Sen, and Katak. So these films actually inspired all those new waves in other nations. And the other biggest impact in film studies was brought about by that film journal, Cahiers De Cinema. So it inspired a new generation of filmmakers across the globe. We come to the end of French New Wave and the discussions on film movements. Next time we'll meet for a live class. Please go through all these lectures. If you have any doubts, please clear it in our live class. So thank you girls. Have a nice day.